They slid an invitation under my door that night. Halloween bash, 8 p.m. sharp. Wear your darkest costume. I put on a plague doctor mask and 2 blocks later realized the house had already trapped me inside. I remember that evening clear as day. I just finished a double shift at the coffee shop, feet sore, shoulders heavy from leaning over the espresso machine. I was new in town, 4 weeks in, boxes still stacked in the corner of my living room. The envelope looked fancy, pricey paper, the kind you'd expect for a wedding. The words on the front were simple and direct. Halloween bash. No name. No RSVP. An address 2 blocks away. This is the address on the invitation. I grabbed a battered plague doctor mask from the closet. The one with the cracked resin beak from a party years ago, slipped on a dark coat, and left at 7:45. Leaves crunched. Kids in capes chased each other, and the air smelled like burnt sugar and damp pavement. The Victorian sat on the corner with orange lights glowing behind tall windows. Music bled through the glass. Old rock at first, then a slow waltz that settled like a cold hand. The music changed. I pushed the door open and called, "Hello? Party?" The house swallowed my voice. Living room staged for guests, plastic skeleton chained to a chair, fake cobwebs in a chandelier, but no cups, no snacks, no laughter. The kitchen counters were spotless, cabinets bare. My phone had no signal. The microwave clock read 8:05. I tried the front door on my way out. The deadbolt wouldn't turn. I wrenched the knob until my palms ached. The windows were latched, the back door sealed. My heart sped, and a cold sweat collected at my hairline. Panic moved in like a second shadow. The deadbolt had been thrown. I ran to the basement looking for any exit. The stair light didn't work, and a phone flashlight painted the boxes in a trembling circle. High barred windows let in a strip of night. Then a shuffle, a muffled voice, a thump behind a door. In a storage room, 2 figures huddled. A guy in a vampire cape and a girl with a crooked witch hat. They looked up like animals caught in a trap. "Help," the guy whispered. "We're locked in. We're locked in." We banged on doors together until our knuckles smarted. The girl said she'd heard footsteps upstairs before I went down. Slow pacing, like someone marking time. We broke a small kitchen window, but iron bars kept the ledge impassable. The music looped, a patient, mechanical thing. The house kept playing the song. One bar showed up on my phone. I dialed 911, voice thin. The dispatcher said, "Stay put, officers are on the way." Blue and red strobed across curtains. Police battering rammed the front lock, and officers rushed in, puzzled. "This house is supposed to be empty," one officer said. He told us the owner had died years ago and the estate was tied up in court. Someone had broken in, set timers for lights and music, planted invites in nearby apartments, footprints in dust, hidden speaker wiring, a T. Someone had prepared this. They took our statements and photographed the rooms. We left under a fluorescent pall, clinging to the normal task of moving. The officers moved through the house with professional calm, gloves and notepads, their flashlights sweeping like careful questions. I watched them mark dust with numbered cones and trace the seams where speakers had been hidden. The smell of the place, old varnish and dust and something like iron, sat in my mouth. I answered the questions the way people answer when they are still astonished, in measured sentences that avoid the jagged edges of panic. I signed forms, read my own handwriting on a statement, and felt the ordinary bureaucracy try to make the night into a file. I slept little that week, folding clothes mechanically, packing the coat that still smelled faintly of smoke from the streetlights, and I felt the thin split between the thing that had happened and how others would read it on paper. I packed fast and moved a week later, as if distance could separate a memory from the skin. New apartment across town, smaller, noisy neighbors, thin walls. I told myself fresh streets would help the past stay where it belonged. I moved out, but the rhythm followed. A mug slipped from my hand and shattered. The shards winked like teeth. At night, the new fridge hummed a low, steady note that sounded like a measure of the same waltz. An envelope appeared in the mail among bills, plain, no stamp, my name banded in a hurried hand. Inside, a blurry photograph of me on the Victorian's porch, the plague mask's shadow sharp against the wood. Scrawled on the back, "Miss the party?" That photograph landed like a small, precise weight on my chest. I found myself replaying the porch in my head, the way my shoulders hunched beneath the coat, the silhouette of the mask, the angle of the light. I carried the image around the shop in secret like contraband, tucking it into my apron pocket, sliding glances at it when a rush slowed, wondering whether the man behind the lens had been watching us all night or had returned later just to see how we'd left. The uncertainty gnawed at me because it meant someone had the patience to watch and wait and then reach out. "Miss the party?" I called the detective who had taken our statements. He promised he'd check the envelope, but his voice carried the practiced distance of someone who fields such calls all night. I told myself a friend with a cruel joke, a misdirected prank. I poured drinks all day, smiled at regulars, and slept in fragments. A key arrived. Days later, a rusted key slipped into my door with a note. "Come back." Unfinished. I drove to the station and handed it over. The detective swabbed for prints. The lab found nothing conclusive. Then the girl who'd been with us went missing. Her phone went dark. The detective's face hardened and the case that felt like an accident began to look deliberate again. She vanished. I slept in a motel by a highway for a night, neon buzzing through thin curtains. I scanned jaded local archives and found mentions of disappearances tied to that neighborhood in the 90s. Names, dates, a pattern none wanted to finish. Someone in town had used that history to build a lure. The thought crawled like a cold insect under my skin. The motel was the kind of place where fluorescent lights lived in the walls, and the sink had a slow leak that never quite stopped. I slept clothed on top of the thin comforter and listened to the highway like a distant metronome. In the early hours, I looked up old microfiche and library clippings, finding names that repeated in the oddest places and dates that clustered like tells on a map. I read about neighbors who remembered parties that turned quiet, and about a man with a temper who had kept to himself until the town moved on. The deeper I read, the more the edges of the story lined up in ways that made my skin tighten. Whoever crafted the invites had knowledge and time. History wasn't dead. One evening, the power died. I sat with a phone light and listened to footsteps pace outside the door, slow and deliberate. A faint waltz seeped through the wall, though my speaker was unplugged. I bolted into the bathroom and whispered into a dispatcher until officers arrived. Footprints found in the hall mud. "Stay alert," they said. "Footprints in the hall." A storm came and thunder shook the windows. Glass smashed one night. A figure stood on the fire escape in a plague mask, rain painting long drips down its black cloak. He climbed in with the quiet confidence of someone who had rehearsed the move. I grabbed a lamp and swung. He hit the floor. The mask rolled and the face beneath was not ancient and shriveled like a ghost. He was young, 20s, eyes bright and oddly calm. Cops burst in minutes later and took him in. He climbed in. In custody, he spoke of legacy. His grandfather had owned the Victorian and been tied to rumors of missing people decades ago. He said he wanted to continue a family story, to finish something the old man started. He'd planted invites, wired speakers, and watched people walk the porch. They found the girl in a basement the grandson used. She was alive, shaken to the bone. He confessed to the trap. The arrest was messy and public the way small towns make such things. Cameras leaned in on the grandson's hands as officers cuffed him, and murmurs ran like a thread through the crowd. At the station, he gave answers that slipped between confession and performance. Sometimes he spoke with brittle candor about family stories. Sometimes he smiled in ways that didn't touch his eyes. The prosecution pulled together probate records and timelines of the estate. The defense argued about gaps and the difficulty of proving intent across years and faded documents. The press called it a family tragedy rewritten as obsession. The town called it news. The detective kept digging, pulling core files and ledgers, pointing out entries that suggested someone had been rewriting a story for a long time. He confessed. The town breathed. Papers called it closure. The detective told me the prints on the key matched nobody in their database and that some files had gaps. He kept looking at ledgers and court records. He would call with small updates, and I learned the language of waiting. Quiet, careful, a slow collection of small evidences. Gaps remained. I moved again, farther from that house. Therapy taught me to notice panic and name it aloud. I learned breathing exercises, practices to stop my chest from racing when a melody curled into my ear. I built routines, work at the shop, jog at dawn, dinner with a friend, check the locks thrice before bed. Small disciplines helped edges dull. I checked the locks, yet echoes came. Surveillance-style photos appeared of the two others in public spaces, sent to me with a single line, "They're next." I tightened my circle and kept a bag packed, a charged phone, the detective's number on speed dial. The grandson's trial moved forward, and the town called it justice. But the waltz had already nested in the bones of anyone who'd been there. They're next. Months passed. The arrest stitched some tears, but not the whole map. Sometimes when a cafe's playlist spun an old waltz or a thrift store record scratched a similar bar, my body remembered the porch before my mind did. I would breathe through the sudden spike and remind myself the rhythm was a memory, not a current command. The waltz returned. Life rebuilt in increments. I kept the photograph in a locked drawer and let the detective sift through evidence. I went to therapy and learned to hold the panic like a small bird until it calmed. I let myself laugh with coworkers. I slept longer. I learned the difference between a closed file and the slow work of healing. Healing is small work. Therapy didn't make the memory vanish, but it taught me to treat it like a bruise, something that would lighten if I avoided picking at it. I learned grounding exercises, names for the noises that made me flinch, and ways to return my attention to the present when the past played like a stubborn record. I found a friend who listened without offering tidy reassurances and small routines, a morning run, a black coffee before work, a text exchanged at night, became anchors. Over months, the shock dulled enough for ordinary moments to feel possible again, and I started to accept the difference between surviving and being defined by what happened. Sometimes I write lists, simple things to remind myself I am still here. Keys, kettle, lamp, phone, bag. I paste small notes on the fridge. Breathe, sleep, call. Friends visit and bring casseroles. Their ordinary concern is a kind of medicine. The detective updates arrive sporadically. Details of filings or a new lead that never quite becomes a headline. I volunteer at the shelter on Sundays because doing something for others stitches the feeling of helplessness. There are nights I still jump at a creek. Nights I wake with the taste of iron on my tongue. But there are longer mornings now. Cups of coffee that are warm for the first time. Laughter that doesn't feel rehearsed. The city continues. A bus belches, a jackhammer rumbles, someone plays violin under a bridge. Those ordinary noises are the map back to normal. I learn to trust them again, small step by small step. In the drawer, I keep the photograph wrapped in tissue, not to fuel fear, but to remember how fragile routine can be, and how fiercely I choose it and survive. I still hear it sometimes. I make coffee, I say goodnight to friends, I keep my bag by the door. The invitation changed me, carved a line I carry, but it did not end me. The music hums low in the place where memory lives, and I carry on a life stitched together from small, stubborn choices. I still breathe, and I keep moving forward always. Sometimes, late at night, I stand at the window and watch the boarded house across the street, counting breaths until the waltz fades. I check the locks, breathe, and make tea. Small victories stack. A full night's sleep, a laugh that comes without flinching, a friend's voice that steadies me. Each quiet morning is a small rebellion, proof that despite fear, I've built a life that keeps moving forward. Again.